During the lockdown in 2020, something unexpected happened. Self-help books suddenly exploded in sales. And honestly, wanting success isn't a bad thing. It can be one of the best parts of life. But just like anything pleasurable, the idea of success can mutate into an obsession. Or worse, a shiny illusion that quietly pushes people toward the opposite outcome: unexpected failure. Whether we like it or not, our culture has become a winner versus loser society. And usually, the winners are few, while the losers are many. So naturally, a lot of people treat nearly every part of life as a competition. The obvious ones: work, finances, career. The subtle ones: appearance, lifestyle. And thanks to social media, where every piece of our lives can be compared, ranked, and measured through likes, views, and shares, that competitive mindset extends to the most absurd details. Suddenly, it's not just about having a good job or looking presentable. It's, how do you brush your teeth? How do you sleep? Which brands do you wear? Are you up to date on the newest trend? On social media, anything can be turned into a race, and you're not supposed to fall behind, ever. A perfect example was when social platforms revived the obsession among young women to have the so-called thigh gap. Something doctors have repeatedly explained depends far more on bone structure and genetics than on body size. These new competitions create new desires for success, yes, but they also create new anxieties about failure. Much of the research about modern insecurities, especially those amplified by social media, illustrates exactly what we're talking about. There's even a book called The Anxious Generation that digs deeply into this issue. And as exaggerated as it may sound, this is real. We know people go into debt to buy certain tech, clothes, or lifestyle items, not because they truly need them or use them, but because they want to prove to others that they're as far away as possible from being seen as failures. They want to appear like they're succeeding at life. That doesn't mean that everyone who buys something nice is doing it for approval, but there are people who spend absurd amounts of money only out of fear that their neighbors or their online audience might see them as the losers of their area. Because again, everything around us carries this quiet message: compete or fall behind. The logic behind this obsession is simple. Obsessing over success automatically means obsessing over failure. The more you think about winning, the more space you give to the possibility of losing. And for this modern obsession, one that many people don't even realize they have, there exists a massive industry worth millions of dollars: self-help. That's why it's no surprise that self-help sales skyrocketed during lockdown. The more pressure people feel, the more uncertainty they face. The closer they feel to failure, the more desperate they become for something that gives them a sense of control, even if it's tiny. And in many cases, that something is self-help. Of course, there are some genuinely good authors and books, but the self-help industry is also filled with nonsense, like the best-selling book, The Secret. It sells people the magical idea that if you wish for something hard enough, the universe will rearrange itself to make it happen. This so-called law of attraction, and scientifically, I don't even need to say this, is absolutely not real. Yet the book sold millions. And in some workplaces, they even hand it out as mandatory reading. Why does a book that promotes pure fantasy become a massive bestseller? Because bad self-help feeds the most unhealthy parts of our obsession with success. It massages our need to feel important, gives us simple storylines where we are the protagonists, and even borrows from spirituality by suggesting there's a higher force guaranteeing our victory. Almost as if success were our birthright, it convinces people that wanting something is enough, that the entire universe will bend so that you win. This is where good and bad self-help separate. Good self-help recognizes complexity. Bad self-help denies it, because complexity doesn't sell. Good self-help books admit something essential. Failure exists, failure happens, and failure is part of reality. They don't weaponize the idea of failure to scare you into following instructions. They don't threaten readers with, "If you don't do exactly what I say, you'll fail." Instead, they treat failure as something that may appear in any meaningful process of healing or improvement. And that's exactly why books like Dopamine Nation by Dr. Anna Lemke stand out. Even though it contains a few motivational paragraphs, it doesn't promise magic. It doesn't tell you that your addiction will disappear if you just think positive. Instead, it recognizes complexity. It recommends professional help. It acknowledges that even with treatment, relapses happen, and recovery requires real effort from the patient. In the world of The Secret and many other low-quality self-help books, just talking about failure is seen as a terrible sin because supposedly you're attracting it. But in Lemke's perspective, wishing addictions away simply doesn't work. Desire alone is not treatment, and positive thinking is not medicine. This highlights the fundamental difference between good and bad self-help. Good self-help embraces reality, even when it's uncomfortable. Bad self-help denies reality because denial sells better. Unfortunately, the internet is filled with the latter. Simple, feel-good messages that ignore complexity. A constant obsession with positivity. A constant obsession with success. A constant avoidance of anything labeled negative. The message becomes, don't think about problems. Don't think about failure. Don't acknowledge difficulty. Just believe, and you'll win. Remaining motivated isn't the problem. Motivation is great, but motivation is not magic. A seriously ill person still needs treatment. Motivation helps, yes, but it doesn't cure the illness. Someone with deep social anxiety still needs knowledge, practice, and sometimes guidance, not just hype. Every real problem requires motivation, plus tools, plus information, plus support. Not fantasies, but simple answers sell. Instant solutions sell. Magical shortcuts sell. Admitting that failure is a possibility, that requires thinking, that requires patience. And in moments of high uncertainty, like during lockdown, people find that deeply unpleasant. So they run toward books, videos, and creators who promise certainty, even when the promise is fake. And ironically, the more people obsess over success, the more they unconsciously think about failure, because success and failure are two sides of the same coin. You cannot fixate on one without awakening the fear of the other. In an article I read while preparing this video, the author referenced a paper titled The Search for Happiness in Self-Help Literature, a bioethical challenge. It argues that the explosion of self-help content comes from a growing belief that we must be perfect, that society pushes ideals, mostly through social media, about how we should live, look, act, and even feel. People compare themselves on absurd levels. Who brushes their teeth better? Who sleeps more correctly? Who owns the trendiest item? It sounds unreal, but it's happening everywhere. This obsession isn't created only by social media. It's also fueled by general distrust in the job market, financial uncertainty, and shrinking social safety nets. As one psychologist featured in the article explained, many readers treat self-help books as a last hope, adopting every idea as if it were an unquestionable truth. The article doesn't specify which utopian ideas it refers to, but we can guess. The belief that beating depression is as simple as always thinking positively. The idea that discipline and motivation erase trauma on command. The illusion that life's hardest problems have simple answers. Any mental health professional will tell you that is simply not how reality works. But on the internet, where nuance dies instantly, the obsession with success becomes panic. A desperate flight from failure that sometimes pushes people to self-destructive extremes. I'm talking about advice that looks like self-help, but is actually self-hatred disguised as inspiration. The kind of advice that glorifies characters like Travis Bickle from Taxi Driver or Jordan Belfort from The Wolf of Wall Street, not as cautionary tales, but as role models, as if being broken inside were a virtue, as if being ruthless were a success mindset. This is how dark psychology gained traction on platforms like TikTok. Manipulative tactics, intimidation, emotional control, all presented as valid strategies for winning in a success-obsessed society. Years ago, I read an article that explored something I had never really considered before, but that makes complete sense. The naturalness of failure, not in a pessimistic way, not as a moral judgment, but as a realistic part of being human. The article included reflections from elite Olympic athletes, people at the absolute top of their field who didn't win first place, or who experienced long losing streaks after years of dominance. Just imagine it. Your entire life revolves around one goal, and despite all your effort, you don't win the highest prize. We assume that must be devastating, but surprisingly, many athletes don't see it that way. Why? Because accepting the possibility of failure is part of their mental training. It helps them stay focused. It keeps their minds clear. And even when they don't win the gold, a silver medal is still a monumental achievement. Their countries welcome them home with pride, celebrating them as examples of what the human spirit can accomplish. In other words, one of the healthiest ways to chase victory is by accepting that you might lose. Because if your entire mind is consumed with fear of failure, you'll never be fully present in the effort itself. Therapy works the same way. Anyone who has gone through a real therapeutic process knows that relapses happen. They feel awful. They can feel like total collapses. They can feel like you've returned to square one. But you keep going because relapse is not the end of the journey. It is part of the journey. Someone who wants victory must be willing to face the risk of failure. That's the basic price of trying. We've all heard the phrase, "The road to victory is paved with many failures." And it's true. It's strange that even though so many success stories begin with countless failures, society still fixates on this toxic idea that you must be perfect, successful, flawless at all times. You must never slip, never lose, never fall behind. And the internet makes this even worse. I once saw a tweet from a random account, no name, no profile picture, telling an Olympic silver medalist, "If you're just going to win second place, why even go?" Like they were wasting everyone's time. It's unbelievable. But it shows how distorted people's expectations have become. Under this obsession with success mindset, some people apply the same harsh judgment to themselves. They genuinely believe their failures, unless they achieve every possible success they could theoretically achieve. And that's exactly what those articles warned about. When you live under pressure to be perfect, your mind starts merging impossible ideals with rigid, inflexible expectations. But perfection isn't real, and chasing it only leads to misery. You don't need to be absolutely successful to be successful. Success depends on what you value in your own life. For some people, success is building a loving family. For others, it's building a $1 million career. Both paths have benefits. Both paths have costs. The problem is that we rarely question the source of our definition of success. For some, success is simply whatever receives the most approval. And in that desperate race for external validation, people can end up living unhappy lives that look successful from the outside, but feel empty on the inside. Thankfully, many others define success on their own terms. They shape it according to their own values, their own goals, their own sense of meaning. But many more chase a version of success built entirely on outside pressure, built on whatever social media decides to glorify next. And that's where marketing comes in. One of the most powerful tools in advertising is selling people tiny fragments of an idealized successful life. In a shirt, in a phone, in a car, in a luxury bag, in some product they don't even need. So in the end, the real question becomes, what does success mean to you? Where did that definition come from? And how did it form inside you? These questions are harder than they look. At the end of the day, I don't make these videos because I believe I hold some absolute truth. or because I think I've figured out the perfect formula for life. None of that. I simply share reflections, questions that come to mind, ideas that feel worth discussing, thoughts that might help someone pause and reconsider the pressure they're living under. Because the truth is this: our definition of success is often artificial. It's shaped by trends, by pressure, by comparison, by marketing, by whatever social media decides to reward this week. But success becomes a healthier, more peaceful concept when it's something you define, not something imposed on you. If success is loving your family well, then that is success. If success is building a powerful career, then that is success. If success is living quietly, honestly, authentically, then that is success. Success is not supposed to be a prison. It's not supposed to be a scoreboard. It's not supposed to be a constant battle against imaginary competitors you've never met. Too many people chase approval their entire lives, running after mirrors that only reflect what others want from them. They end up living successful lives that feel empty, constantly terrified of failing at an ideal they never chose in the first place. And others, fortunately, manage to step away from all that noise. They build their own definition of success. They shape it slowly, consciously, according to what truly matters to them, not according to what sells, not according to what trends, not according to what strangers online consider winning. So the real challenge, the one that actually matters, is to ask yourself, what is success for me? Where did that idea come from? Whose voice shaped it inside my mind? And is that voice even mine? These questions are not easy. They require honesty. They require vulnerability. They require sitting quietly with yourself. But they matter. Because until you define success in a way that aligns with your actual values, not society's expectations, not social media trends, your life will always feel like a competition you didn't choose to join. So let me leave you with this final thought. Before you chase success, make sure you know which success you're chasing. Thank you for watching. And remember, so much of what we call success is just noise. You get to decide what is real.